you have a non-for-profit organization called Read to Succeed Africa. So in your view, how has the emergence of digital been able to impact the African or Nigerian education space? So I'd like you to speak from your experience specifically.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. And I thought I was going to come here in the spirit of Omojua, so if I'm being controversial, please, it's in the spirit of my brother. That's how he behaves. So, to answer your question, I'm going to flip it because I don't, in the public education space, which is where my experience has been, particularly primary public education, because if people can't read or write, I mean, I don't understand this whole thing about digital. If you can't read or write, basic literacy, we're not going to get very far. And that's what you see in most of our public schools, over 24,000 of them around the country. So I don't think, in terms of digital and the way we talk about it, most of the computer labs and most of what they call computer labs, the computer labs look like museums, and the computers look like they came from 1800. And the teachers don't understand it. The students don't either. So it's just something that is kept there like an orisha of some sort. And so that's why programs have failed, such as one laptop per child and all these other like digital things around education, because digital doesn't fix foundational problems. Okay, it's an enabler, like Fali said. And so in my experience, it hasn't helped very much. I think what we should focus on is digitizing our processes. And then you could talk about digitizing education. So what do I mean by that? I see a lot of companies, and I'm not going to call them out, do book drives. And people say book drives because the devil is a liar. Because people assume that there are no books in our schools. That's a half truth. Because if you go to the State Education Board, their warehouses are overfilled with books. So, in my experience, the illusion of the ignorance is not our greatest problem. The illusion of knowledge is. So we assume that we have a book problem. Nobody questions it. What you have is a logistic problem. How do you get the books from suburb to the public primary schools? So let's start asking questions first before we assume digitization and all this fancy things is what our problem is. How do we even get basic things right? Logistic problems, getting books to schools. The second problem of digitizing your HR in your school. So in most of the schools I go to, they say, oh, we don't have teachers. That's a half truth. Because on paper, you have 12 teachers in the primary school. In reality, you have 28 because a lot of teachers are undocumented. So I would just like to challenge us, like in our generation, let's not jump at the solution and say, yes, we need to tech this, tech that. Actually, let's actually start to understand the problem first, and then we'll give ourselves a chance to succeed.
Thank you very much for those points. I'm going to go over to Otega. So you've been the group head of marketing communications at BUA Group for the past 4 to 5 years. And since 2015, we've seen a big change in the way that BUA Group has been perceived digitally. So my question for you is, digitization is a fundamental issue for companies, but what are the main roadblocks to understanding it for your business?
Thank you very much, Lily. I would like to start from where Simi stopped. Simi said something about digital digitalization, and looking at your processes. It's not. So I started out quite early. I head of corporate comms at GT Bank 24, and it's not uncommon for you to hear people say, "Oh, Tega is not." It's not uncommon for you to hear people say Tega is not a champion of digital, but it's far from the truth. What I rather do is sit back, look at the entire processes, do a lot of research, understand what the needs are, understand what the issues could be, and rather than providing end solutions and working from the back to the front, you actually say now you can use digital to enhance your processes. So, for instance, at Boa Group, I joined Boa Group in 2015. We chose not to jump on the whole social media, digital bandwagon immediately. We stepped back. We said, see, as a business, we are those areas that we need improvements on. Where can we get comparative advantage over our competitors, both in the media space and public space, and even in our operations? So you go to any Boa factory today, for instance, it's fully run on fiber optics. We're the only factories in Nigeria that operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for an entire year. We close only 2 years, 2 weeks a month, once in a year for maintenance purposes. And that's because we have found a way to integrate digital into our processes. I'll go back to internal communications, for instance. The first thing I did when we got there was, you can't have people championing your brand as a big brand as Boa, even though we're number 13 amongst companies our size in share of mind space. As when I joined, we said we can't go out there talking about company if the people in house do not even understand the values and the culture we're trying to do. So we went on an acculturation drive. We set up an intranet, and the aims of the intranet was to inform, to communicate, to educate, and to engage. So on one end, you're passing out news top down from the company to staff. On the other end, you're educating them on what the company stands for. You're also building their capacity in different areas across board. We do courses on leadership, everything, all on the intranet. You don't have to bring people to the head office to come and do those things. You now go further and you say, we need to engage you. It's one thing for us to talk down to you, it's another thing for you to be able to talk to us in the way you understand, so that we can have a very, very clear glimpse of what you're trying to say. And within a year and a half, without doing much, without increasing marketing spend, we found out that, hey, we had moved from number 13 amongst companies in our group to number 3 in terms of share of mind and share of voice. And then we said, oh, which other companies are between us and the number 1? I mean, I'm in an industry that has the richest black man in the world, competing with us across all business lines. My marketing budget cannot compete. So I said, we then went another step forward and looked at all the stakeholders, government stakeholders, media stakeholders, other partners that we have in the private space and everything. And then we made sure that we designed digital communication activities and digital marketing activities to fit those stakeholders. You wouldn't see me on some sites. For instance, if certain sites carried certain things about Boa at certain points in time, we would actually write to them to pull it down, because it was not telling our stories and narratives the way we wanted it to be. And then finally, we should also understand that with an increased focus on digital also comes the idea that you have to leapfrog innovation. But for big companies like us, it's a major challenge. So on one hand, governments and every other person is expecting that you should be able to provide jobs. I mean, you should be able to bridge the gaps or the deficiencies that, let me use the word, governments have failed to fill. And with digital comes, in some ways, lots of jobs if there are no skills to actually take up those jobs that are digitally enhanced. So what have we done? We have automated where we can automate. We have also looked at our staff across both direct and indirect staff, contract staff and the rest, and train them, build their capacity up to the point where they're specialists on certain digital tools that they use in their work, both on job and both off-site. And I mean, we do our measurements year in, year out, and we can see the impact it has had on us. We still employ over 30,000 people across board. And if you do the multiplications, if you're supporting one person, you're supporting about 4 people in Nigeria at the minimum. That's a direct impact of about 120,000 people. That is minus the attendance effects of our work on other things.